Hello, Frey. So thank you very much for joining me here. No, thank you very much for offering your time. Giving a bit of your energies in, and I'm looking forward for this exchange of thought-provoking discussions and ideas. And I've been following a little bit how you are engaging in these current discussions about the pandemics and this global crisis. And I'm very curious to hear, to engage in this living discussion with you. So we know already each other for a little while, even though we haven't been so much in touch lately. But I feel it's a great opportunity now to join in common directions. And perhaps you could start off you by sharing your professional, personal trajectory, and give us a little bit a feeling, a sense where you come from and where you find yourself right now.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your moral support and your thoughtful insights, and especially I really resonated with the reflective sensitivity of your writings, and it's been a very interesting trajectory, actually. That we've gone through, different periods of misunderstanding and conflict and resolve, and I'm really happy to have come around to this point. So thank you for the opportunity. Well, just briefly then, my forebears were Jews, so. On my mother's side, Russian Jews, and they were very much involved with the Russian Revolution. And when Stalin came to power, my family was sent to Siberia, forced marched across Russia to Siberia, where most of them died then in the gulags. And there was some kind of métissage, a mix with the Kazakhs. And that's why I have some Oriental traits. My father's family were Polish Jews, and they escaped Hitler's juggernaut by attempting to hide in Austria, and they adopted the name Faust. Mm-hmm. Faust, which is a code word for together. Together we're strong. Faust is the German word for fist. But they were also caught, most of them, and then taken to Dachau. And then just a very few, like a couple of them, escaped across the Marseille underground and went to New York. And my great-grandfather on the Russian side and his wife also escaped. I have no idea how they managed, but they went to New York also. And so this was the Red Underground, let's say. Most of my family have been involved in one way or another with revolutionary movements in the United States. My grandmother was a Trotskyist. My grandfather still believed that Stalin was a good leader. There were several who were members of the Wobblies, anarchists, etc. So my mother kept the tradition. She was a militant feminist and considered herself a Marxist. So I was raised, in this ambient, studying the dialectic and looking at history from the perspective of oppressed and oppressor, but also somehow wrapped up in the hippie era. So my mother was not really a hippie. She was maybe on the cusp of the Beat generation, which were more nihilistic and negative about the prospects of society. And the hippies were exaggeratedly naive and optimistic, and there was, all through my childhood, there was this contradiction. My mother, who was definitely cynical about, or let's say critical of, this kind of naive indulgence of positivity, almost to the point where it was mandatory in the hippie generation. And yet she was part and parcel of it somehow. my mother became a cult leader. She was a figurehead for thousands of people across the world. She wrote several books. She led very large groups in self-awareness rituals. She developed a whole system of divination herself. And well, it was not so easy to be her son, because she was, for one reason or another, she was very angry with men in general and saw them as the harbinger of everything that was wrong with society. And she also made common cause with a lot of other women who were also enraged. And as I grew, as I became visibly more male, I was the subject of their hatred. And so I learned that my body was somehow inherently evil, that my gender was responsible for everything that was wrong in the world. And this was sort of a stain on my, well, it definitely damaged my sense of self. And this was also the reason why my mother turned me out when I was 15. So she sent me away because she saw that she saw me as an interloper for the enemy, and I was already privileged by society, so I had no need of her support. And so I spent years living on the street, living hand to mouth, scavenging, sometimes being forced to steal food to survive, living in abandoned houses, doing odd jobs, cleaning floors, taking care of children, washing dishes, you name it. And I developed several survival skills as a result.
And
I don't want to paint a totally negative picture of my childhood, because there were many precious things that I got out of it. But I'm just trying to give you sort of a frame for some of the things that marked my consciousness. Let's say that could be interpreted as negative.
You know what? Actually, what is pretty fascinating that you know each other for already a number of years. I think it's almost 20 years, and
Yes.
I was completely unaware about this background. Perhaps
Yes, most people are.
yeah, you're always so focused on exchanging common fields of interest related to dancing, and so maybe we need this global crisis in order to open up other compartments that maybe was just not a very common place to exchange in so-called normal times. So thank you very much for sharing this. For me, it's pretty stunning, like to learn more about the details of your background. And one thing that is pretty strike me now, when you talked about your Jewish background and all this nobility that our ancestors they have to go through in order to survive, and we inherit that, that nobility. And when I refer to our past, and I can recognize like how well they were able to deal throughout such challenges. And now when you bring it back in our current times, and it seems like there is a big discrepancy, like of it's like maybe these I don't want to romanticize, but this kind of nobility that allow us to be here right now, to be occupying this body, that I think we are somehow succumbing to this power of technology or this global communication vehicle that may be shaping people or compartmentalizing minds so rapidly. And how could you relate when you through your own like your own lineage, through your own blood, when you look behind, and probably you can see like so much suffering, so much pain, and people they had to endure that. Now it seems like you are poor frail creatures, that you're sort of giving up our own power so easily. So I don't know if you have put any thoughts on that, like like to see if throughout this evolutionary process, if you're also compromising some fundamental values in how to face a challenge in life.
Well, so my mother, who was angry, you know, let's say she was traumatized, and so she passed the trauma on to me. And then as I went along, I met other people who were traumatized, and they also used me as a way to you know, ventilate their trauma. And whether it was you know, people who were older than me, or people who were angry at white people, or it was people who were angry at Jewish people in general, or people who were angry at straight people. When somebody in my life had more power than me, they often abused that power. So the lesson for me was, well, it's not about these characteristics. It's not about the amount of melanin in your skin. It's not about your ethnic lineage. It's not about your sexual preference. It's about how you manage your own pain, and also how you manage your social station when you have more leverage over other people. You know, how you manage your own interests and the interests of your identification group when you see them threatened. And for me, then the issue becomes more general. It doesn't have to do with this or that, let's say this or that group in particular. You know, so the groupings to me are more happenstance and have to do with affinity and you know, trust markers rather than anything else, because coalitions are obviously a better solution to ensuring the survival of the group. So, but I don't attribute much more significance than that to it. So I'm not looking at the, you know, I'm not looking at the ethnics. Anyway, I'm not looking at any of those incontrovertible details. You know, those are things that people can't do anything about. But what I'm looking at is that power burns in our hands, and it's very hard to manage because, well, we want to be healthy. We have our own things to do in our lives. We also have people we love and want to take care of. So those are our first priorities. And when we see those priorities threatened, then we'll disadvantage other people in order to try to take care of those first things. And when people, you know, make a larger group, like I don't know, a corporation, you know, or a nation, and when that nation has more leverage over another, and they see their interests threatened, then that works out negatively for the other group. But I'm not, you know what I mean? I've gotten to the point where I don't culpabilize. Like I'm not willing to point fingers and broad brush with simplistic narratives that are dichotomous, you know, good and evil, and, well, the filthy rich and the whatever, the evil Jews and so on. Like for me, that none of that, all of that is red herring. It's a distraction from the actual problems we need to solve, which is, you know, okay, so we all do have our own needs, let's say, and also desires and wishes. You know, how do we manifest that? What is our individual as opposed to group prerogative? And these are constant questions. I don't think that there's ultimate answers. I think that the problem for me is when people try to, you know, think that they have an answer, and they try to impose that answer, you know, with the idea that there could be an absolute morality, with the idea that there could be a penultimate solution for society, with the notion that once we get the system or the, you know, the definition or the education or the structure, once the structure is perfect, then everything will be fine. And I think that is naive. You know, I think this kind of naivety is that it ultimately leads to nihilism. Mm-hmm. Because when we have this kind of expectation, then we're bound to be disappointed. And the disappointed works out as, you know, it becomes cynical. So I think that people who think that we need to have another structure in society, that they could fall prey to the idea that we need to collapse everything. We need to destroy everything and start again. We need to start with, these ultimate ideas about what is right or wrong. Well, okay, so there's, the lesson of religion for me is that these pat definitions of what is right or wrong, that they lead to complications, because a religion, of course, it embeds everyone in a web of behavioral structures or strictures, and that simplifies social relations, because everybody has their role, and you expect that they have this behavior, and when they don't behave that way, they get punished. And that's the way society's basically been for a long, long time. So in like 200,000 years of slavery, basically, where whether it was age or gender or divine right or blood, we had unelected people who told us what to do, and they had the right of life and death over us. And of course, we had the right of life and death over them, because they had to follow the rules also. But those those simplistic ideas about what is the right or wrong way are actually not really reflected in the universe. They're arbitrary. We've come to the point where we can see that they're arbitrary, but I think humanity is not willing to let that go. So when you see people who are supposedly not religious, but they think of themselves as socialists or communists or whatever, if they have this ideal that all we have to do is do this and everything will be right, and people just have to behave ABC, and then everything will be perfect, that for me is the same thing. It's the same old, same old. So I don't actually see that we're progressing very much. There are significant changes in that some of the ideas about how people should behave or could behave have been dismantled. And I'm going to turn this off. And just the last thing I'll say before you go on with your thought is, yes, so it's like slight advances out of slavery. Basically, I think we still are slaves, and that is the normal. That is normal. Like ice ages are normal on planet Earth. Most of the time, the planet has been in ice. Most of the time, human beings have lived under slavery. And I think we have that genetic habit. Like, I don't think that it's so easy for us to trust other people to the point where we don't meddle with them, to the point where we don't try to make them do what we want.
So it seems like this is an issue that it belongs to our human history. It's this relationship of having a small minority who controls and have power over this big majority.
Well, that we grant them that.
Right. I think that's I think we grant them, but at the same time we're being also programmed by that. It seems like it's being perpetuated. It's a virtuous circle. What's your vision? What's your take on this cultivation of a space where individuals could cultivate a sense of self-responsibility in order to extend that, to enlarge that for the community, so that we can slightly shift the paradigm or conceive of ideas that could bring any sense of balance? Because I think what we can recognize here is that these relationships are being established, are being predicated on notions that are not very, very balanced, at least not for the vast majority, is benefiting just specific parcels of the population. So what do you envision, like in terms of like very pragmatically, that could be done, like within our small limited field, that which kind of souls we could or seeds we could sow on this terrain that it may support, I don't know, I think something that goes beyond our capacity to to decide, but what are the actions that we could take in this moment that perhaps for the future generations they could harvest something, a bit closer towards this space where at least we can recognize that's not functional well. So what are the functional actions that the gardeners could get engaged now to create other perspectives in life?
Well, I mean, once again, I don't believe in absolute solutions. Like, I don't think that there's any one strategy that you could, or one path that you could take that wouldn't have problems of its own. You know, like they say, every solution just makes more problems. And you know, like, people have been very diligent. They've gone about solving a lot of the problems that have to do with our existence. People, it's a very different world now when people have glass in their windows so that daylight comes in, and live in houses where climate is controlled, and there's, you know, they can have basically cheap clothing and go around and communicate with each other over vast distances. And for much more of the population at this point, there's many more possibilities for choice of lifestyle, and you know, longer life, better health, and so on. I mean, there's choices that people make. Now, if people choose to treat themselves badly, and they choose to eat poorly, and they choose to mismanage their relationships so that there's a lot of psychological, physical, and a physical junk in their lives, you know, that basically kills them, then that's also their choice. I mean, that's the thing. Are we going to force people to behave the way we want them to behave? Just because we think that, you know, well, you know, you shouldn't buy all those pharmaceutical drugs, and you shouldn't, you know, eat all those French fries, and you shouldn't smoke on chain smoke, and so on. And you shouldn't be fat, and you shouldn't do this and that and the other. I mean, those are all manifestations of the fact that people now have the choice. They have the choice to misbehave. They have the choice to mistreat themselves. But they also have the choice to treat themselves well. I think, like, there's a fundamental, which is that children come into this world basically ignorant of all these things. You know, what you need to eat, etc. So there's a legacy problem. Also, children are beholden to their parents. So their parents are basically their dictators. That's our first experience of the world, is as a slave. And that's a very difficult transition. You know, so parents who are conscious of that, sometimes they make themselves the slaves of their children. Well, that's not really different. That's just the same paradigm in reverse. But I think this is really a problem, like the legacy problem, which is the transfer of information and useful information to children. I think that a lot of times children are not being taught to think critically or to consider things for themselves. They're taught to accept paradigmatic dogma. They're being instructed to memorize and regurgitate details which are actually irrelevant for their lives. So I think maybe, you know, maybe something like this, but, you know, critical thought is not budgeted. Like, you have no idea what the outcome is. And that is, I think, a huge problem, is when society tries to censor. That when a whole group of people try to shut other people up or ban them, or excise certain kinds of thought or certain ways of being from society, instead of you know, having the trust in the public forum. So if we have a public forum and people are able to hash out different points of view or different interpretations of reality, then you know, at least there's a possibility for critical thought. If adversity is banned, then we cannot continue the discussion. So if there is a way forward, I think it is in discussion. Because instead of picking up weapons and hitting each other, you know, instead of annihilating each other, if we carry this violence into discussion, then we have a sort of, you know, like a simulated war room to, you know, throw thought bombs at each other and word bullets, you know, instead of actually killing each other. And through the process, maybe we can come to terms with the fact that we're just not going to see eye to eye on everything. Now, for me, like the possibility to speak out, you know, whether you know, let's say that somebody hates Jews and they think that, you know, Jews are evil. Well, they have the right to think that. And I would defend their right to think that, even though I am a Jew. So I'm going to go out in the street and I'm going to demonstrate against the imposition of, or the eradication of civil liberties, along with the fascists and along with the Jew haters and along with all the other people, because we have a right to discuss all of those things.
That's very
and no one can take that away from us. I don't think that they should. I don't think we should go back. That's not progression.
And what do you think is happening right now? Do you think we are about to give up this space of sharing this diversity of voices in our society? Do you think now this fear that's being so much programmed collectively is giving a fertile terrain for us to go backwards in our evolutionary history? What's your perspective, you know, to this current moment we find ourselves right now?
Well, you know, I think that the major, let's say the largest proportion of interactions are based on trust. You know, so let's say in just my little corner of the economy, I am developing, you know, archiving information, and then I give it, and then I propose that information. I through my outreach, I convince people of its value, or at least make them curious. They come and they try, and then eventually they see that it's worthwhile for them to invest in. And that I think is the basis of most exchanges. I go and buy bread, and I go to this place because I know that they really make good bread, and so on. I mean, millions of interactions that way that are based on trust in the other person's conscientiousness to do their job well, and to do it with pride, and to do it with care. And when it's not done well, then I go somewhere else. I go to someone else that is conscientious and forthright. Well, I mean, I think that is the same kind of trust we need to be able to extend to our leaders and our institutions. But when they when people have leverage over us because of more wealth, or because of more standing, or because they are representing their own interests against all others, and they have the leverage to be able to do that, you know, to be able to hybridize their interests with government, you know, where these are the levers of power, then our faith in those institutions is lost. And people are very sensitive to inequality. They see that as unfair, and I think that that's a mistake. But I mean, I think that there's a real danger in when people have more say so because they have more material wealth, and this is a real problem. So, you know, but trust for me is the issue. So that for me is our weakest link. That's our weakest social link, because when people abuse the trust, then we can go into panic mode. And this is, I think, what happened, you know, over a virus, which, you know, this is not the first time we've had a pandemic. I mean, we just had one in 2017. It was awful. There's been many, and there's ongoing ones. It's not this health crisis that is the problem. This is not the worst one. It will definitely not be the last one. It's the way in which it was manipulated. It's the way in which our leaders stoked fear and panic. So we have a rule in our society that misusing communication to stoke panic, to fuse panic, is illegal. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to shout fire in a theater We're not supposed to, right? If it's unjustified, then that's against the law. And that's it. I mean, that kind of law tells us that, well, you know, there's a lot of people that have been thinking about this. And they're thinking that, well, trust is really important. So unless you have a legitimate reason to make people afraid, you shouldn't do it. But that's exactly what they did. So now, like, a lot of people are terrified. I mean, they're terrified of each other, which is the worst thing that the politicians could have done. It's the worst thing that leaders could have done, is to make us afraid of each other, to see each other as disease, walking disease. We need each other. We have to be around each other. That is the most important project going forward.
So as you well said, we've been through, you know, pandemics, you know, again and again. So it's not a new thing, but it seems like we are adopting a rather unusual narrative, you know, to handle this pandemic.
Well, it's the first time that we've been so connected. Communications technology, travel, etc., has made the whole world an intricate web of trust. If I do something over here, it's going to affect people on the other side of the world. So when the United States, or whenever all these countries tell everyone to stay inside and not do anything, to stop exchanging, then people in the third world start to starve, because there's no more exchange, and there's no more food supply, and there's, you know, I mean, we're so connected. That's the thing. It's so easy now. If you're in power, you can just go, you can push that button, and everybody can just, you know, fall over. So now we have, like, the worst possible thing that could happen is that the way people have responded is now going to end up in much more death, much more disease than this virus.
Do you have any guess why the discourse has been, you know, handed down to the population in this particular fashion?
Why this force?
The discourse, the narrative has been handed down, you know, in this particular fashion. Do you have any?
Well,
do you contemplate on this?
I'm not so willing to. I think that, like a lot of people, there are people who are in government who also think that they have absolute solutions for society. And they might also think, well, you know, we didn't need to take everything down in order to do it right. They might, you know, and they might, you know, be forming coalitions for common interest. This could influence their misuse of this opportunity. You know, that could be. But I also think that, well, you know, people are people. I think, for example, Angela Merkel, I think she's literally panicked. I think she freaked the fuck out. I think she got intel, you know, like that this was some kind of super chimera virus with that was constantly mutating, and it was going to just completely kill everyone. She was terrified. And I think a lot of leaders were honestly terrified. And so but I think that the thing is that we have, you know, like, one person who can negatively influence the lives of literally billions. That is, I think, a fundamental mistake, because we you know, this is the thing, the move towards agglomerating larger and larger groups of people with smaller and smaller governing structures that for me is a de facto return to the monarchy. It's a return to slavery. And people want that. They want the United Europe. They want the agglomerated Asia. They want the United States. They want, you know, these huge structures which, you know, where one person can go and make a trade deal with another person that affects billions of lives. And for me, that is a mistake, because, okay, you might have a person who's really enlightened, you know, and governs well, but that's not a guarantee. You're going to have somebody maybe, you know, gets in there because, you know, voting is, well, it's usually a minority of people that actually have their way in a voting process. And so then you have somebody who doesn't represent the interests of the rest. And of course, it's, you know, it's just, that's a guarantee for social friction. So I think we should be moving towards, you know, something like the Switzerland model, where you have a skeletal central government a small geographical area with cantons that are independent, and city-states like Liechtenstein, you know, where they have basically, there's a monarchy, but they don't govern. And basically people, you know, there's 2% tax, and each city is its own region, and they can secede, and they can vote the monarchy out, and they can vote to change the laws of the country with just a simple referendum of 1,500 people, because it's small, and because they can organize well, because it's flexible, and it's adroit. But when you have these huge structures, you get something rolling, and boom, you know, it's just, I think that's the problem. Well, people, you know, they say, well, if we have a small country, well, then it's going to be vulnerable to, you know, to international interests. But I mean, Luxembourg and Liechtenstein and Switzerland defend their interests very well against the multinationals, and they can, because they have, well, I mean, I know people there, they vote on everything. They vote, you know, to have a public toilet, or to have the park reduced or expanded, or whether or not there's going to be a bike. Everybody in the city has to vote, and they're all involved in the process. But I mean, in Germany, where I live right now, they don't vote. They hardly vote on anything. They didn't vote even to join Europe. They didn't vote for the euro. They didn't vote for the TTP. They didn't vote for Proposition 13. They didn't vote for like all these, you know, fundamental things that are influencing their lives. And you know, that is why the Germans are so angry. Well, I mean, Europe is basically run by an unelected commission of 28 officers. Nobody voted for them. And you see that happening. Okay, the United States, they voted for the president, but you know, the voting process is really flawed. And then the president appoints their cabinet, and the cabinet appoints their administrators. So then there's all these appointed people who are running our lives. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's like, it's not really different. So I think if we really want to do something different, then we need to honestly examine the structure that we've created. And I don't think we need to discard it. I think we need to recognize that it's anchored in our history, and tinker with it. Go slow. Let it mutate. Continue to have a discussion with each other. Recognize the fact that we feel safer in slavery when we're regulated by other people. Recognize the fact that, you know, that we don't necessarily trust each other or ourselves even to behave well. And, you know, somehow, I don't know, you know, I'm not sure what the final solution is, but I think that, well, mutation seems to be the rule in nature. I think we need to allow ourselves to mutate.
Yeah, the point I deeply resonate with you is like, no, I'm not really going for a final solution. I think that lies a big danger when there is whatever fixed promise, you know, because also it creates a relationship of dependence, or an infantile relationship. So always expecting, you know, these external figures to, you know, to sort out the problem for us. So I think that's one to remind back for the sense of you know, become more self-responsible for our lives. But then it's a question that there are lots of people, they don't want also to take that leap, because that implies lots of work, and working on ourselves first of all. So it's it's going to be pretty revealing in lots of aspects that you don't want to see, you don't want to tackle into. And so I think that's in a way it for me it boils down to you know, to a question of how we can raise awareness in that way. And if people,
yes, but also accept that some people they want to be told what to do.
right, but that's a matter
You know?
of consciousness. If you're, you know, if people, they're not willing to move down that path, so what to do? You know, if people want, they prefer to be conforming in this kind of easy.
What are we going to do? We're going to make them?
You cannot.
It's not going to work.
But
the thing is, they shouldn't turn around and try to make us do something either.
But I think that's the current question. No, let's take another very practical example of a vaccination. No, and maybe some people, like an example of this sort of mode of behavior. Some people are expecting the solution will come from the needle. but it's okay if some people, they have this mindset and they're happy with that, that's fine. But how far we can acknowledge that, no? And if that start to come close to this compulsory regulation that everybody has to have vaccination if you want to go.
Yes, well, I mean, it's like what we were saying, you know, it's the same attitude as a dogmatic religion. Everybody has to believe, because if somebody doesn't believe, then that starts to erode the narrative. You know, so like, of course, you know, medical history is littered with problematic treatments, and we you know, it's everything has a side effect. So I mean, anybody who's thinking about it is going to know that, you know, any kind of procedure is going to have some kind of negative fallout. So then it's a question of, well, you know, are we considered sovereign? Do we have the right over our bodies or not? You know, which is for me the distinction between an outright slavery and sort of a halfway slavery. And you know, is everybody actually, you know, willing to live in an ethical rather than a morally dominated society? You know, ethics, I think, are applied morality. Ethics are something that you try to adapt to the context. So you have certain operating principles, and then you understand where you are and with whom and what you're doing, and you tool your responses to the context. Right? You have to weigh your own state and the given conditions, and then devise a strategy rather than coming with a precept. You know, okay, this has to be done this way, regardless. That's more what I think of as an older mindset. You know, you have like operating models which have served society well because that stabilizes relationships. Well, you know, this situation where I can question anything, that destabilizes a lot of things. If somebody innovates, well, it's a huge problem for those who already had a system. I don't know if you've tried to change your behavior. I have, you know, sometimes I had habits that were not really helping me. They were hurting my relationships with people. They were keeping me back in my life. And when I tried to change them, well, it was hell to pay. It was really uncomfortable. And I was susceptible to more injury. I went through periods of melancholy. It's like, it's not so easy to change.
It's hurtful.
So, yes, it's hurtful. So to allow that, to say, okay, you know, we're going to accept that there's going to be change. We're going to accept that you know, I'm going to set up something here, and somebody's going to come along with a new idea that's going to make what I've done irrelevant. Well, that's a very uncomfortable thing to have to accept. But because what happens to me then? What happens to me? You know, I have to survive. I have to eat. I want to take care of the people that I love too. So just because you have a new idea that makes what I'm doing irrelevant, do I just, you know, I don't know, croak? Do I just disappear? No. That's it's a really difficult problem, I think. It's not so easy to solve.
And yet it seems like that's maybe a condition that we could afford not to look into, but now it's there. So we kind of forced to confront with that.
Yes. So, well, I think the vaccine issue is an attempt to return to this kind of boxed society, you know, where there's some kind of strict model that we all have to do something, we all have to do it this way. You know, like, because people have lost trust.
Do you think the sole case of having this potential of going back in time in this slavery, you know, boxes, it is because people have lost their trust, or because people are being inflicted with fear in a way that we lose our critical sense? Our rational capacity are seriously undermined now. So do you think this is just?
I mean, you know, Europe anyway was carpeted with bodies. 2 world wars. It was the most destructive, these are the most destructive wars in human history. That's a deep scar in human consciousness. I mean, of course, you know, there's all the massacres and the empires, the wars back and forth, and hideous things have happened. I mean, we come from a very violent history. Lots of beautiful things too. I'm not saying that there weren't. Of course there were. I mean, it's always been a mixed bag. But I think that people, you know, they're taken with the moment. Like, it's hard for them to have the perspective. Somebody like me, who actually starved, and, you know, huddled over warming grates in the city when it was freezing outside, and did any kind of work just to survive. You know, somebody like me, I have, I think, a better sense of what to be afraid of.
So
to be robbed, to be beaten by people because they wanted what I had on the street, to be totally exposed and vulnerable like that, to be taught that you're scum, that you're basically a disease. These are things that, you know, that mark you. And so I think that actually people are really sheltered, and I think their main fear is the unknown of losing all of that. You know, the unknown of facing the challenges of a disease, for example. And you know, that's something that we can credit the last generation for. They did their best to shelter us, to save us from hunger, to make sure we never wanted, to make sure we always had clothes. They tried to solve all these problems, to try to make sure that we didn't go into this kind of war again. You know, people have been doing their best. And when challenges like this come along, I think many people are they have no idea anymore. They don't know what to do. So I think, like, one of the reasons why I'm outspoken and I'm fearless about it is because I went through that. Because for me, this challenge is insignificant. I mean, I had chronic bronchitis until I was in my late 20s. You know, I almost died on that. I mean, people are going, you know, this virus can reinfect you. Oh my God. Jesus Christ, I was, you know, risking organ failure because this virus that I had kept coming back. And of course, viruses reinfect us. I mean, that's what viruses are for. We live with millions of them. And, you know, the idea is to try to make friends with them, or, you know, at least set up a détente where you understand when they're getting aggressive and you do something about it. You know, but what's really surprising to me is how much responsibility people ascribe to authority, people in authority. You know, that is still, I think, well, that is a sign that people are not ready to manage their lives on their own. You know, so like when people say, look, you know, this system benefits only a few and leaves the masses, you know, at a disadvantage. Well, then when we start to look, you know, we see that actually the great mass doesn't want to be in the responsible position.
Yeah.
I mean, because I know that I'm not going back to the street. I mean, nobody could force me to, at least not willingly. I won't go back. So I'm going to do whatever I can, and that means I'm going to take every risk to set up my own thing, to make my own way.
So but let me ask you,
but people who've always been cared for, they might not have the skill or the gumption or the courage to do that.
It can be a bifurcation now between humanity. For people who will be more prone to succumb, other people who will be able actually to get empowered by exactly by facing lots of challenge and personal difficulties, things that again possibly will not have the strong need to look into that as at least as sharply as it's being now. So it becomes now a question like how the individual will be able to to integrate that and what come out of that, because I think no one, I think that's the thing, we are facing a big unknown. And before we could just displace the fact that the life it is a no, there are no guarantees. So we can afford to to cultivate a sense of illusion and live in a bubble that feels safe, but that's just an illusion. And now I think this bubble is being is being burst, and we
For some,
right. Well,
for others, it's being blown.
that that's true, but I think for at least for a vast majority, that at least that's what I'm able to perceive from here. It's been
Yes, I mean, I think that I see a lot of people saying, look, this is the fragility of our society. It's unstable, blah, blah, blah. Well, stability is totalitarianism.
right.
Stability is autocratic. For stability, we need a dictator. And in this case, we need a global dictator because we're all connected.
For us to have the ability to embrace what we're talking about, so we need individuals who are strong enough to look at life from that perspective, that life is not unstable in the first place, so we can agree together that whatever happens, this is already like a common sense that should guide us. But as long as we are sort of projecting this sense of stability, and towards these external figures, and when it gets shaken, of course, people freak out. People they panic, and I think the outcome of that is this global hysteria that we're living now, which is maybe making the situation possibly even worse, because we need like to have this ability of making actions that maybe can sustain like a common sense, that can sustain points of reflection, and to give more space for things to happen in its own time, and not precipitate with these solutions that, as you well point out, it may be more harmful, even if it's not the intention of people. But then it becomes a question of how much you are able to to look at the situation beyond these emotions that being sort of taking over our system. I think its emotions are there. It's not also to judge the emotions, but I think when it starts to be expressed in such a insidious ways, I think we are now on the verge of not only undermine on freedom, but that the freedom or this space that we've been sort of moving slowly towards as a race or as a culture. As you said, there was a danger we can sort of go back in those models that we don't want to go back. And so that's at least is a point that I'm now I try not get overexcited about one opinion or another opinion. I want to dig. I want to even using Caverna as a cave as a verb. I'm very curious also to listen to to various opinions right now, but I'm really holding myself from getting engaged out of whatever impulse it may feel right in the moment, because I think we're really dealing with such a complex question, and I would like to look at a more systematic way. We have lots of experts, and everybody's looking through particular views, but I think we are now in a situation that this intricate dynamics is going beyond of our capacities to understand like very clearly what needs to be done. And I think,
I mean, I think that if we're thinking critically, if that's the learning key, then we weigh what we've studied and come to our own conclusions. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not a question of believing this or that expert. It's a question of looking at the entire palette of people who are working in those fields, or have had experience, whether it's empirical or anecdotal, and then drawing our own conclusions and discussing it with each other. That is the process. So, for example, climate change. This is another thing where there's thousands of scientists who don't agree that human beings are destroying the planet by warming the atmosphere. And there's thousands of scientists that do think that. Well, that's a question of looking at, listening to, studying what you can, trying to understand the science, and coming to terms with your own perceptions. You don't just hang on the lips of whatever pundit. Because, I mean, that's the thing. If we really want to move past slavery, whether mental or physical, then I think that is the key. Just a story I wanted to tell you. Like you know that I've been setting up this thing called the Axis Syllabus, which is basically an archive. It's a document, but it's also a repository for information about how to treat the body, and it's a comparative overview of different approaches to doing that. So it's not a method or a dance style in and of itself. It's sort of a meeting point for a lot of people to get together and talk about different ways that they work, and to share points of view and feedback each other. And a while ago, a few years ago, a few years ago, it had gotten to the point where I had a group of people who were helping me administrate, and there were more and more people who wanted to become candidates and then get certified to represent the work. Now, the candidates and the people who were certified started to exert a lot of pressure to formalize. They wanted it to be standard. They didn't agree with me that it wasn't a method. They didn't agree with me that it wasn't, that it didn't have a particular, let's say, that it wasn't a particular approach. They wanted to standardize the class formats. They wanted to standardize the criteria for becoming certified. And they exerted more and more pressure on us, the administrators, to do that. And we were faced with mounting complexity in managing it. And I'm unable. And so then we were accused of ineptitude, and also people were suspicious of us because they saw us as having the power, quote unquote, even though we were all working voluntarily. Then inside the administrative group, they started to pressure for being paid. So then getting some kind of formal structure together where there would be secretaries and people in the office and so on and so forth. And so I saw this pyramid gradually steepening, regardless of what I had to say about it. And then there was a crisis moment when what became obvious to me and to others in the administrative group was that people were being certified when they actually didn't have the qualifications. They were somehow getting through. They would, say all the right things, tick off the right boxes, and then once they were through, we would actually see, oh, they're not really the material that we would want to represent us. And people were also jealous. They would say, why did that person get certified? Why not me? Why did this person be a candidate? Why not me? And then this all this like jockeying and elbowing and people also, like we said before, they were also unwilling to actually do the work. So they would come to the evaluation periods without having studied and prepared, and they would freak out, as if it were our fault. And then there was more pressure on us to train them to teach, which was not my idea at all. My idea was, this is a feedback circle for peers. If you want to be a leader, start leading. If you want to be a teacher, that's your call. It's your vocation. You want to do it. We're not here to tell you that you're a teacher. We're just here to offer some kind of a field where you can pick up some useful tips from other people doing the same thing, or look at our archive of information and contribute to it. So sat everybody down and I said, look, this isn't working. Let's just get rid of it. The information is important. That's what's important. Let's just make a, we can get together with who we want to. We can, and people were so furious. They were so angry with me because they had invested a lot in it. Some of the candidates, their parents were paying for them to do this. For some of them, like a certification was really a ticket to a better lifestyle, more economic stability. Some people just wanted to have this umbrella of the reputation that we were building, so that they could survive. And I remember one day when it became very clear that this structure wasn't serving anyone, actually. That at least not the original purpose of the idea, which was to transmit useful information, to embody that information in an individual fashion that was proper for our own body, and to encourage other people to do that as well. That's the original intent. And I remember everybody like sitting there and going, oh. And then one person spoke up and said, sometimes I just want someone to tell me what to do. And then people were crying and so on. But I mean, we managed to take it down. I mean, we made a compromise. So now there's this kind of there's a bit of a structure there, but people are much more obliged also to take the initiative and to structure their own process, to find their mentors, decide their focus, and then engage with us on their own initiative.
And that's very interesting, because I can recognize similar dynamics in my own case. So then I wonder if you think this is an inevitable human tendency within any ever-growing structure.
I don't know if it's inevitable, but it's certainly a habit. My mother used to say, the universe has no laws, only habits.
Right. But since the habits are so ingrained and embedded in this kind of a self-perpetuating system, and as you well point out, as long as you are sort of educating the children, to copy our habits, so how can we wire these tendencies, or that you likely sort of maintain this level of dysfunctionalities? How we can look at those habits and challenge that, instead of just using the habits to justify or whatever needs to be accomplished in that moment. Because I think the complexity of these dynamics, it's I recognize, or at least it's very clear when there's the purity of certain movements in the beginning, they are not polluted with any concerns of how I'm going to make my living and what is my status here. It's kind of totally deprived of those layers. But there's one moment, let's say the call for your dignified life, how I can make my living, how I can grow a business. So I think we are also dealing with this sense of immediacy in our society. And I think that's where maybe there's a clash, because we can sort of tap into that space where we can afford not to think so much, especially if you don't depend on that, at least financially. So you can cultivate certain values, or you can sort of deal or dance with these habits in a much more functional and a healthy way. But as soon as that start to grow importance, it feels like there are other layers start to take over. So there are other concerns, there are other narratives that start to sort of turn over these origins and the original purpose, so to speak. And I think this is a question I have with myself. And I really
just to respond to that, because otherwise I'll forget what you said. Well, first of all, I don't think we're going to save the world.
Hopefully
that I think that's the idea, I think, that leads to totalitarianism.
Right.
Yeah. like when I'm teaching, I do not, get frustrated when somebody doesn't adopt my suggestions anymore. Like I used to. I used to be a dictator in class. I used to think that I knew what everyone needed. And as I got more into the material, I realized that I don't know what people need. I have no idea what they've lived through. I don't know what injuries they've had. I don't know what their chemistry is. I don't know what social precepts they have. So I try, understanding that I have my biases, I try to offer what I'm teaching on an open hand. And if they take it, fine. If they don't, fine. If they take it in a way that's unexpected, fine. The only thing is there are certain rules that we need to put in place for a group, for the benefit of the group. And I'm more like the guardian of those rules. So, okay, so that's like an unbudgeted attitude towards the social sphere. I'm not programming an outcome. I don't have expectations about how people should behave. So if people think that they're Christians or they're right wing and conservative, or they're left wing and they're progressive, or they believe in identitarianism, or everybody needs to find their body and take a step and maybe feel something about how their body's made. And then from that point, we can move into space, and there's certain things about respecting the space that other people need so that I can have it. And then we can go into a dialogue. And I'm not here to dismantle the culture, the previous culture or the current culture. I'm here to investigate. Now, I do have my lines that I don't want to cross. For example, in Africa, when I saw this little girl, she had her head stuck in between these two balustrade, like on this terrace. She got stuck and she couldn't get out. She was eating something and she started to scream. Her mother came and yanked her out by one arm and then smacked her across the face. And her food went into her lungs and she started choking and she was crying. I looked at her mother and I said, "Was that necessary?" And her mother laughed and said, "She won't do that again." Well, this for me represents a cultural divide. Like I would never treat my children like that. But I can't step in to another social circumstance and negate that they have their own rules and the reasons for doing things. So I might criticize it, humbly, but still I'm critical of religion. I am all religion for the things that I think that mire people, that hold them back, and don't let them then perceive themselves as at cause, and don't let them recognize and understand the way that they could immediately benefit others by manifesting or developing their own talents or attributes. But I know also that religion has served. Obviously it's served. It's been an anchor in society. And there are things that we need. We do, like the principle of having behavioral regulation and rules for interaction. It's obvious that that's necessary. Obviously, we can't just have a free-for-all. Freedom is not a value in and of itself. In fact, nothing is a value in and of itself. We have to know how to apply it, and so we need structures. So I think we have to allow that in the Amazon. There are tribes that kill their children when they see that they're homosexuals. We have to allow that. There's places in the world where women are covered. We have to allow for that. We might not agree with it, and I think we also have to allow ourselves not to agree with it, and we also have to allow ourselves to express that disagreement. We express it in public dialogue. We don't go and force people to behave otherwise. Because there is mutation, but there's also the resistance to mutation in nature. Yeah. Ecologies set themselves up and they find stability through a selection process. and you disturb that, and you have, you know, you destroy that ecology. So I think tinkering is what nature does best.
It's very interesting. But you said that at a certain point in the process of the Axis Syllabus structure growing, so there was a moment that you have to dismantle that. So where do you draw the line? And how do you realize this necessity when whatever qualities of expression start to take over, that it doesn't become functional any longer? So
well, for me, this situation is where I draw the line. This situation is, I'm no longer, you know, in the background, shifting perspectives through embodiment. I'm out on the front line. No, not with me. No, I'm not going to support fascism. No, not for any reason. And I'm going to be vocal about it, because I'm going to use the chance that where I can still talk about it, to be vocal about it.
And I think,
you know, it's one.
Yeah.
I mean, people waited too long before, you know, and that's what happened. So Germany, this is a good example, or Russia, etc.
Now to draw the line.
Sorry?
You think people wait now too long to draw the line?
Yes, I think they wait too long. I think they wait too long. So when in the Axis Syllabus group, you know, when all of that was happening, I saw it coming. And I was also thinking, like in the very early days, there was something really cultish about the way people were treating me, you know. And I was always suspicious of that. I'm not your guru. I'm a person with a lot of problems, and I'm still working them out too. You know, if you think I can teach you something about how to move, but that's it. Like, don't ask me for life advice or something. You know, if you want to walk this pathway, fine. Walk it shoulder to shoulder with me. I'm sure you have things to teach me too. Like, don't put me up there, because I have a lot of work to do, and I don't want to pretend to be perfect, and I don't need you to pretend that I am. But, you know, like, I've also recognized that I have to work within what's happening. A long time ago, I started something called the Mouse Project, because I was looking at the way mice convert or repurpose a house. They don't destroy the house, they turn it to their own use. Mm. So I've gotten here, like I've just arrived, billions of years of evolution and all this stuff going on, and I just got here. Do I think I have the right way to do things? No. I'm going to take whatever's here, whatever's been set up, and I'm going to work with it, you know, and repurpose it. And so that's what I was trying to do. Well, you know, it got to the point where the power structure that we were creating was now a ladder for opportunistic people that could weaponize it.
Right.
And that's where I went, no, no, no. You over my dead body. And that was the last moment where I could say something, because if it had gone another turn, then the Axis Syllabus would no longer have been in any way under my jurisdiction. You know, and that's the thing. I think you have to decide, okay, I still have the power to influence now. Let's use it.
It just shows how complex humans are. No?
Yes.
How tricky it is to establish the sense of community.
Yes, and also like how much we don't like that.
And yet
we want to simplify things.
Yeah, and but I have a question for you, Frey. Like now, since you're already like tackling the subject of Axis Syllabus, is coming our field of work. So, how do you see the projection of your work as
the future?
Yeah, the future as a teacher and events and festivals. Like, how are you flirting with these future scenarios? Regarding Axis Syllabus and everything related.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think our area of work is really written on the void. Like it's so delicate. It's so tenuous. Look at what happened. Like everybody freaked out, and all of a sudden Basically, if they continue, like if people freak out so much that they are just terrified of each other and don't want to be anywhere, you know, other than 6 meters away or 6 feet away from each other, then we can kiss our profession goodbye. Like performances, classes, contact dances, that'll have to be done in secret. It'll be illegal or something like that. I mean, you know, what about like if people are so sure that human beings are destroying the planet that they think we have to reduce our population to 10% of what it is now and stop traveling and stop transporting and stop producing things? We'll revert to you know, a pre-industrial agrarianism, and that was a very isolated, miserable, very difficult life.
We're going to have an ever-growing numbers of a black market of a contact jams.
I think that's good. That would be actually probably what's going to happen. I know that it's already happening.
Sorry,
I know it's already happening. But
mafia for black market.
yeah. Look, I don't know, man. Things, you know, things go in cycles. So I picked up, I think, where a lot of people had left off. I found like the, you know, archives of thoughts that are very similar to the ones that I was trying to work out, and that were, you know, 50, 60, 100, or even thousands of years old. So, you know, that means that people had insights, they had intuitions, they realized something, they put it together, they started to communicate that, and then something happened. And then society forgot, you know, and then there's people like us, they're like digging around. Oh, look at this, look, you know, look, Rosalia, look, they were thinking about the spine 1,000 years ago. Look, they actually knew something about the spiral 10,000 years ago. So I think, you know, who knows what's going to happen. Maybe everything's going to shut down. People are going to go into this kind of, you know, closed in mode, and society is going to revert to a kind of autocratic dictatorial slavery model with sci-fi underpinnings. And then at a certain point, everybody's going to shake themselves and go, huh, what the hell are we doing? You know, maybe. I have no idea. But what I'm trying to do is collect everything I'm working on, and consolidate it and store it, you know, and archive it in a way that it could be preserved for future generations. And I'm also trying to spread it out as wide as possible. I'm trying to make it as available as possible within the means that I have. You know, so now I have this online reserve. It's a communication platform. It's called the Axis Syllabus Forum. And there, you know, I'm putting all the articles and all the things that I'm writing and all my thoughts about, and people are all invited to do that. So then you have like, it's, you know, a couple of, I don't know, like 7,000 people worldwide that are involved and in class and exchanging ideas and so on. And I don't know how many people have, you know, picked up the materials and used them in their way. And I keep encouraging people to do that. You find something you think is useful, please integrate it. You know, this is like you know, a level playing field of information that's available to everyone. And you go ahead and make your own brand. You know, put things together in your way. Wonderful. And then we can get together and we can talk about how you do things. I can say, okay, well, this is what I'm working on. That keeps me fresh. Keeps me evolving. That's what I'm trying to do.
Sounds like a very dignified way of, you know, sharing your legacy.
I think it's just sensible. Look, you're an alpha. I look around me and I see a lot of alphas. Like I'm not gonna make war on alphas just so I can have the top dog position. That's ridiculous. I think I'm just guaranteeing my own defeat. If we just talk about it in practical terms. So as young people evolve and they come up and I see that they're ready for leadership, I grant them that. Even if I see that they're not quite ready, I'll delegate, or say, you know, here you do this, or, you know, why don't you take over here? Why don't you, you know, or if they take initiative, great. So here's some authority. And of course it's not. Of course it's going to backfire. Of course there's going to be problems. But if I didn't want problems, then I'd just commit suicide.
So one thing that sticks to me when you recently have the exchange of a message, online, and then we talked about the past conflicts, and then you told me that conflict, something like that, the conflict is privilege of intimacy.
Intimacy.
Yes. And for me, that was a touching very deeply. That I really felt the guy's bumps. I think that was moving something on a very deep level. I'm very grateful for that.
Man, I think that this is actually a big problem with Facebook, because your contacts are called friends, but they're not. What is a friend? A friend is somebody that you've tested, and they tested you, and you go through a certain process where you get to know them, and you understand, okay, this person doesn't have my best interest in mind, and is actually interested, self-interested, or competitive with me in a negative way, and so then you say, okay, this can be, I can work with this person. They can be, like a contact for such and such, but a friend is somebody who has my back. Friend is somebody that I can really argue. I can say, I think you're fucking up. I think you're, and they're going to maybe be angry with me, but I know that the relationship is solid enough to withstand my honesty. But to pretend that the whole world, that everybody in it is your friend, that's, I think, naive, but it's dangerous, because then people have expectations, and so they go out and they see, oh, actually this person, I think they're an asshole. I think they're human trash, but they're called my friend. It's a contradiction in terms. And I think that you need to narrow the circle. You need to block people. You should create spaces with people who are who have principle. They might not be like-minded, but they have principle. And you can develop an affinity with them, to the point where you can have an honest discussion about the disagreements. And I think people were taken in. They were naive about this. And I think Mark Zuckerberg did everyone a great disservice. It's hypocritical. I mean, it's also an instrument, and we should be adult enough to know how to use it. Like we should be adult enough to know that not everybody can be our friends. But it seems like there's a terrible wish, right?
And it seems like there is no way back.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I'm weeding out people. If people are insulting, if they're hostile, if they engage in character attacks, if they repost panic-inducing narratives, then I shut them out of my space. It's not that I don't even want to argue with them. If it's somebody that I've known for a long time, I might give it a try. I'll go, okay, actually, I don't think that this is, I don't agree with what you're doing.
Right.
If they come back with hostility, then okay, I tried.
I'm pretty much with you in these terms.
Yeah.
What I meant, that the way friendship has been, the perception of friendship has been shaped by social media, maybe Facebook,
Yes.
and Instagram is even for me is even a more serious issue.
Yes.
Like how can go back, because the new generations that come already with that kind of value so installed.
Well, we're all being shocked.
Yeah.
We're being shocked into the realization that edited conversations don't necessarily reveal character. That's only something that you see through an evolution. And actually, you miss so much when you don't have people in front of you. The hormones that get into your body, the biome that you exchange, seeing them from different angles, seeing them interrelate with other people, getting to know something about their history. Because otherwise you have this sort of denatured. It's like looking at vacuum packed meat. It's a slice of an animal, but you have no idea what the process, you're totally divorced from that process. So, you know, it's dangerous. And we should, I mean, it's really useful too. Like we should recognize that it is dangerous. Like every instrument, like every instrument can be something that we can use for positive result, but it can also be a weapon.
Absolutely. All right, Frey, I think it's time maybe to wrap around. You know, it's been a delight, and for me, it's been really mind-blowing, you know, to hear your perception of the situation and hear your stories. I'm very grateful, you know, for this sharing. I think it surpassed by far my expectations, you know, and so I want to thank you very much. Really, that was it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Bruno. Thanks for letting me speak.
Yes, and I hope we can continue somehow feeding this space because it feels very nourishing.
For me, it's been therapeutic also. And I miss you. I can't wait to dance with you.
I look forward.